Imagine yourself walking through the dense Bavarian woods on a cool April evening in 1776. The air is crisp, carrying with it the scent of pine and damp earth, while the only light that guides your steps comes from the soft flicker of lanterns scattered among the trees. In the distance, a group of men gathers, shrouded in secrecy. These men, led by a passionate professor of law named Adam Weishaupt, are not ordinary individuals. They are visionaries, intellectuals, and dreamers, united by a common purpose: to challenge the very foundations of the world as they know it. This was the night the Illuminati were born. It's easy to romanticize the creation of the Illuminati as something out of a novel or a spy thriller. A clandestine meeting in the forest, a whispered pledge to overthrow the oppressive powers of the time, and the dream of a new world shaped by reason, knowledge, and freedom. But what truly motivated these men? And how did this seemingly small and obscure group evolve into one of the most feared and misunderstood societies in history? To understand the origins of the Illuminati, you have to first step into the shoes of Adam Weishaupt. Picture a young, brilliant man, raised in a society dominated by rigid religious doctrines and conservative political forces. The Catholic Church had a stronghold on the minds and hearts of the people, dictating not just how they worshipped, but how they thought, lived, and even governed. Weishaupt saw this for what it was: a cage, a barrier to the true potential of the human mind. It was a time when the winds of the Enlightenment were beginning to blow across Europe, whispering promises of reason, science, and individual liberty. Yet, in places like Bavaria, these ideas were still treated with suspicion, even hostility. To openly challenge the Church's authority or the government's rigid control over intellectual life was to risk everything: reputation, livelihood, and even life itself. But for Weishaupt and others like him, the cost of silence was far greater. How could one stand by as human potential was crushed under the weight of outdated dogmas? The desire to break free from these shackles became the seed from which the Illuminati grew. Weishaupt wasn't just rebelling for the sake of rebellion. He was fighting for the right to think freely, to question authority, and to envision a future where knowledge reigned supreme over superstition. It's important to understand that the Illuminati were born at a time of great turmoil and transformation. The world was on the cusp of monumental change. Across the Atlantic, colonies were beginning to whisper about independence from British rule. While in France, the rumblings of revolution were growing louder. The Enlightenment wasn't just an intellectual movement. It was a call to arms, a demand for a new order where individuals were not subjects to kings or popes, but sovereign beings capable of shaping their own destinies. The Illuminati were not alone in their quest for change. Secret societies like the Freemasons were also rising in prominence, providing intellectuals and reformers with spaces to discuss radical ideas without fear of persecution. But what set the Illuminati apart was their laser focus on creating a world where knowledge and reason could flourish, unimpeded by the dogmatic chains of the past. Weishaupt's dream wasn't just to create a club for intellectuals to debate in secret. It was to plant the seeds of a global revolution in thought. He envisioned a world where rulers were no longer chosen by divine right, but by their ability to lead with wisdom and fairness. A world where the Church no longer held a monopoly on truth, and where every individual had the right and the duty to seek out knowledge for themselves. But even the most visionary ideas are often met with resistance, especially when they threaten the status quo. The Illuminati quickly realized that their dream of a new world would not be welcomed with open arms. Weishaupt and his followers knew that to survive, they had to operate in the shadows, and so secrecy became their greatest weapon. Members took on aliases, and meetings were held in hidden locations, far from the prying eyes of the Church and the state. But as with any secret society, the very act of hiding their intentions only fueled suspicion. What were these men discussing in the dark corners of taverns and remote forests? What was the true purpose behind their cryptic symbols and rituals? To the outside world, the Illuminati became not just a group of thinkers, but a potential threat, an invisible hand capable of pulling the strings of power from behind the scenes. This, of course, was not their intention. The Illuminati didn't seek to control the world, they sought to enlighten it. But in a society where power was tightly held by a few, any movement that sought to redistribute that power was seen as dangerous, even treasonous. When we think of secret societies, we often focus on the mystery, the symbols, the cloak and dagger intrigue. But at the heart of the Illuminati's mission was something profoundly human, a deep, almost desperate desire for freedom. The freedom to think, to question, to dream of a better world. And in this way, the Illuminati's struggle mirrors the struggles that many of us face in our own lives. How often do we feel trapped by the expectations of society, by the roles we're forced to play, by the limits imposed on us by those in power? How often do we yearn for a life where we can pursue our passions and curiosities without fear of judgment or punishment? The Illuminati were not just fighting for abstract concepts like reason or knowledge. They were fighting for the right to be fully, authentically human in a world that often demanded conformity and obedience. In many ways, the story of the Illuminati is the story of every individual who has ever dared to challenge the status quo, to dream of a better, freer world. It's the story of rebels, visionaries, and dreamers. People who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. As the lanterns flickered out in that Bavarian forest in 1776, Weishaupt and his small band of followers could not have known the impact their ideas would have on the world. They couldn't have predicted that centuries later, people would still be talking about the Illuminati, still speculating about their influence, still fearing their supposed power. What they knew was this: they had planted a seed that would grow in ways they could never fully control or anticipate, but one that would carry with it the promise of a new world. A world guided not by blind faith, but by the light of reason. As we reflect on the origins of the Illuminati, we are reminded that the fight for freedom, intellectual, personal, and political, is a timeless one. And in this sense, the Illuminati's legacy lives on, not just in the conspiracy theories that swirl around them, but in every individual who dares to question, to dream, and to seek a brighter future. Secrecy often breeds suspicion. There's something innately human about the need to understand, to uncover what's hidden, especially when those secrets seem to wield power. Imagine yourself living in late 18th century Europe, a time of great upheaval, but also of deep religious influence. Power structures, both religious and political, were rigid, and to question them was not just dangerous, but subversive. The Illuminati, with their clandestine meetings and whispered conversations, were a beacon for those seeking change, but also a target for those in power. Yet, secrecy wasn't just a choice for the Illuminati, it was a necessity. Adam Weishaupt and his followers understood that their ideas were radical, even dangerous, to the established order. The very foundations of the group, challenging the authority of the church, questioning the control of monarchies, and promoting the spread of knowledge and reason, were seen as threats to the status quo. To protect their members and their mission, the Illuminati wrapped themselves in a shroud of mystery. But mystery is a double-edged sword. The more secretive they became, the more their influence was suspected to stretch far beyond their actual reach. What began as a small group of intellectuals discussing philosophy and societal reform would soon become the center of countless conspiracy theories, rumors, and fears that echoed through history. Human beings are hardwired to fear what they don't understand. The unknown has always carried a certain weight of danger, whether it's the shadows lurking in the forest at night or the whisper of a rumor spreading through a community. In 18th century Europe, this fear was magnified by a world that was deeply hierarchical and religious. People knew their place in society, and the church and monarchy reinforced these structures, leaving little room for deviation or dissent. The Illuminati represented a break from these established norms, and they did so in secret. To the powers that be, whether religious leaders, monarchs, or even everyday citizens, this secrecy suggested something sinister. Why would anyone need to operate in the shadows unless they had something to hide? And if they had something to hide, could it be trusted? The church, in particular, felt threatened by the Illuminati's promotion of reason and knowledge over faith. For centuries, the church had been the primary authority on truth. It held the power to decide what was right and wrong, both morally and intellectually. The idea that knowledge could be separated from religious doctrine was revolutionary, and to those in power, dangerous. Secrecy only amplified these fears. It was easier to demonize what was hidden than to engage with the actual ideas the Illuminati were promoting. We can relate to this today, too. Think about the unease many of us feel about organizations that operate behind closed doors, whether they're government agencies, large corporations, or elite social clubs. When we don't know what happens in those rooms, our imagination fills in the blanks. Often, what we imagine is far worse than the truth. For the Illuminati, this was a blessing and a curse. Secrecy protected their members from persecution, but it also made them a target of growing suspicion. The Catholic Church had been a dominant force in Europe for centuries, its influence stretching from kings to commoners. It wasn't just a religious institution, it was a political powerhouse. To challenge the church was to challenge the very fabric of society. And yet, this is exactly what the Illuminati set out to do. They sought to promote Enlightenment ideals, reason, science, and freedom of thought, values that stood in direct opposition to the church's teachings. In the church's eyes, the Illuminati weren't just another intellectual society. They were a threat to the divine order, a group of radicals seeking to undermine faith, morality, and the stability of the state. As the Illuminati's influence began to spread, particularly among intellectuals and even some members of the nobility, the church took notice. Soon, a campaign was launched to root out and destroy the Illuminati. The church's approach was twofold. First, it sought to discredit the Illuminati by associating them with heresy and sin. Stories were circulated about the group's supposed occult practices, their rejection of religious values, and their dangerous ideas about freedom and equality. In a deeply religious society, this was a powerful weapon. The Illuminati were painted as godless heretics, plotting to overthrow the church and lead people away from salvation. Second, the church exerted political pressure on the rulers of Europe. In Bavaria, where the Illuminati were founded, the government was heavily influenced by the church, and it didn't take long for them to act. By 1784, just 8 years after the Illuminati were formed, the Bavarian government issued an edict banning all secret societies, including the Illuminati. It was a decisive blow, and one that would force the group into hiding. But as with all attempts to suppress ideas, the ban only fueled the fire. Rather than extinguishing the Illuminati's influence, it spread further underground. Their very existence became a matter of speculation, and soon the lines between reality and rumor began to blur. The Illuminati might have been a relatively small group, focused on philosophical debates and intellectual freedom, but the rumors about them painted a far darker picture. What started as fear of their secrecy soon morphed into paranoia about their supposed reach. They weren't just an underground group of thinkers anymore. In the eyes of the public, they became puppet masters, pulling the strings of political events across Europe and beyond. One of the most significant rumors that began to swirl around the Illuminati was their involvement in the French Revolution. As the revolutionaries in France rose up against the monarchy and the church, some began to suspect that the Illuminati were behind the revolt. How else could such a dramatic overthrow of power occur unless it was being orchestrated by a secret group with a grand plan? This idea that the Illuminati were responsible for major political upheavals became a central theme in the conspiracy theories that followed. It's not hard to see why. The French Revolution, much like other major revolutions, was a time of chaos, uncertainty, and fear. People needed to make sense of it, and the idea of a hidden group manipulating events provided a comforting, if terrifying, explanation. We still see this phenomenon today. Whenever there's a major event, whether it's a revolution, a financial crisis, or even a natural disaster, there are always whispers of conspiracy. Who is really behind it? Who stands to gain? In the absence of clear answers, the mind fills in the blanks, often imagining the worst. The Illuminati, with their secretive origins and intellectual ideals, were the perfect villains for these kinds of stories. There's something deeply compelling about the idea of a secret group controlling the world from behind the scenes. It taps into our most primal fears, the fear of powerlessness, of being manipulated by forces we can't see or understand. In the 18th century, as today, people wanted to believe that there was someone, somewhere, pulling the strings. It gave them a sense of order in an otherwise chaotic world. Conspiracy theories about the Illuminati also offered a convenient scapegoat for those in power. When revolutions or social upheavals occurred, it was easier to blame a hidden group of intellectuals than to confront the real, complex causes of these events, such as poverty, inequality, and the spread of Enlightenment ideals. For the Illuminati themselves, this must have been both frustrating and frightening. On the one hand, their influence was being grossly exaggerated. They were being blamed for events they had no involvement in, and their name was becoming synonymous with revolution and chaos. On the other hand, they were being hunted. The more they tried to protect themselves through secrecy, the more they became targets of suspicion. Imagine, for a moment, being a member of the Illuminati in 1784. You joined the group because you believed in the power of knowledge and reason to transform society. You wanted to discuss ideas freely to push back against the oppressive forces of religion and monarchy. But now, you find yourself living in fear. Fear of being discovered. Fear of being labeled a heretic or a traitor. Fear of being persecuted for ideas that you believe will one day set humanity free. It's not hard to see the emotional toll this would take. You're part of a group that is constantly watching its back, constantly hiding from a world that doesn't understand your mission. And the more you try to protect yourselves, the more you're seen as a threat. In many ways, the story of the Illuminati is a reflection of a much larger conflict that continues to this day. The battle between tradition and progress, between faith and reason, between control and freedom. The Illuminati may have been rooted out in Bavaria, but their ideas lived on, spreading through Europe and into the New World. The Church's campaign against the Illuminati was about more than just one secret society. It was a defense of the old order, an attempt to hold back the tide of Enlightenment thought that was sweeping across the continent. But as history has shown, ideas are not so easily suppressed. The Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason, science, and individual liberty, could not be stopped. And in many ways, the Illuminati became a symbol of this intellectual revolution. Even today, we see echoes of this struggle in debates about science, religion, and the role of knowledge in society. Who controls information? Who decides what is true? And how much freedom do individuals have to think for themselves? These are questions that continue to shape our world, just as they shaped the world of the Illuminati. In the end, the Illuminati's secrecy was both their greatest asset and their greatest vulnerability. It allowed them to protect their members and their mission from the church and the state, but it also made them the perfect target for suspicion and fear. As their name became synonymous with conspiracy and revolution, the true nature of their ideas, freedom of thought, reason, and intellectual progress, was often lost. The Illuminati may have been rooted out in Bavaria, but their legacy of secrecy and suspicion would live on, fueling countless conspiracy theories that continue to capture the imagination of people around the world. In a world where power often operates behind closed doors, the story of the Illuminati serves as a reminder that secrecy can be both a shield and a weapon. And it raises an important question. How much do we really know about the forces that shape our lives? And how much is still hidden in the shadows? Take a moment to imagine the upheaval of the late 18th century, a time when the world as many knew it was unraveling. Across Europe, revolutions simmered beneath the surface, monarchies trembled, and the very idea of divine right was being torn apart by new ideals. Now, in the midst of this chaos, picture a group of individuals who had quietly been nurturing these new ideas, influencing thought leaders, and shaping the intellectual environment of the time. For many, that group was the Illuminati. Even today, conspiracy theories abound, claiming that the Illuminati not only had a hand in shaping revolutions and world events, but that they continue to manipulate global affairs from behind the scenes. Were the Illuminati truly the puppet masters of history, or has their legend grown far beyond their actual reach? To understand the truth, we need to delve into both the factual and speculative roles that the Illuminati may have played in shaping history. Few events in history have been as tumultuous or world-shaking as the French Revolution. It was a time of bloodshed and upheaval, a rebellion against monarchy and the ancient regime that reverberated across Europe. But was this revolution the natural result of societal tension, or was it orchestrated by shadowy forces pulling the strings behind the scenes? The Illuminati were often blamed for the chaos of the revolution. The reasoning was simple. They were known to advocate for ideas like equality, liberty, and the dissolution of absolute power, concepts that aligned perfectly with the revolutionary ethos. For many of the time, the fall of the French monarchy seemed too sudden, too well coordinated to have happened by chance. The theory went that the Illuminati had been quietly working behind the scenes for years, planting the seeds of rebellion, funding revolutionary activities, and guiding events to their inevitable, bloody climax. But let's take a step back and consider this. Revolutions are not born overnight. The French Revolution was a response to decades, even centuries of political corruption, economic disparity, and social injustice. The people of France were starving, heavily taxed, and oppressed by a monarchy that seemed indifferent to their suffering. Enlightenment ideas, championed by philosophers like Voltaire and Rousseau, had already taken hold in the minds of many intellectuals and commoners alike. Did the Illuminati contribute to the spread of these revolutionary ideas? Perhaps. But to claim that they orchestrated the revolution from the shadows is to oversimplify one of the most complex and multifaceted events in modern history. Revolutions, by their very nature, are born from the collective will of a people, not the whims of a few individuals, no matter how influential they may be. Across the Atlantic, another revolution was taking place. The American colonies were fighting for their independence from British rule, and the formation of the United States became a symbol of freedom and democracy. But even here, whispers of Illuminati involvement have persisted through the years. Some believe that key figures in the American Revolution, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, were either members of the Illuminati or heavily influenced by their ideals. It's true that many of America's founding fathers were deeply influenced by Enlightenment thought, and some, like Franklin, were members of secret societies such as the Freemasons. But were they part of the Illuminati, guiding the birth of a new nation according to a hidden agenda? The evidence for such claims is, at best, circumstantial. The founding documents of the United States, such as the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, do espouse many of the values that the Illuminati held dear: liberty, equality, the separation of church and state. However, these ideas were also the core principles of the broader Enlightenment movement, which had spread throughout Europe and the Americas by that time. That said, the idea that the Illuminati may have played a role in the founding of the United States has persisted, in part because of the symbolism associated with America's creation. One of the most frequently cited pieces of evidence is the design of the Great Seal of the United States, particularly the pyramid with the Eye of Providence, or the all-seeing eye atop it, which appears on the $1 bill. For some, this symbol is clear proof of Illuminati influence, as similar imagery was used by the Freemasons and was later associated with the Illuminati. But symbols are open to interpretation, and while it's true that secret societies have long used such imagery, the connection between the Great Seal and the Illuminati is tenuous at best. The use of the Eye of Providence in the seal is meant to represent divine guidance or the watchful eye of God over the new nation, rather than the influence of a shadowy, secret society. Symbols are powerful. They transcend language, cultures, and even time. It's no wonder that so many conspiracy theories surrounding the Illuminati focus on symbols, particularly those that appear in public spaces, on money, or in the architecture of major cities. When we see these symbols repeated again and again, it's easy to believe that there is some hidden meaning behind them. For example, consider the architecture of Washington, D.C., or the layout of Paris. In both cities, some have pointed out that certain landmarks seem to form geometric patterns or alignments that hint at secret occult meanings. In D.C., conspiracy theorists point to the arrangement of the streets and monuments, suggesting that the city was designed by Freemasons and perhaps even the Illuminati to reflect their hidden power over the nation. But these patterns, if they exist at all, are more likely the result of urban planning than the machinations of secret societies. Humans are naturally inclined to find patterns in randomness. It's a phenomenon known as pareidolia. And while it's tempting to see secret symbols in the design of cities or the layout of currency, the truth is often far more mundane. However, that doesn't mean that symbols don't carry power. In fact, the very idea that symbols like the all-seeing eye or the pyramid are connected to secret groups like the Illuminati adds to the mystique and allure of these symbols. Whether intentional or not, they spark the imagination, leading people to wonder what hidden truths might be right in front of their eyes. Perhaps one of the most enduring conspiracy theories about the Illuminati is their alleged goal of creating a new world order, a one-world government controlled by a small, elite group of individuals. This theory suggests that, since their inception, the Illuminati have been working toward the ultimate goal of global domination, using their influence over governments, economies, and media to slowly tighten their grip on the world. The idea of a new world order is frightening because it taps into a very real fear. The fear of losing control over our own lives. The thought that a small group of elites might be pulling the strings behind every major decision, manipulating world events to serve their own ends, is deeply unsettling. And yet, there's little evidence to support the idea that the Illuminati, or any other group for that matter, are working toward this kind of global domination. But the fear persists. Throughout history, there have always been concerns about the concentration of power in the hands of a few, whether it's monarchs, political elites, or multinational corporations. The New World Order theory is, in many ways, a reflection of these anxieties. As the world becomes more interconnected through globalization, and as power becomes more centralized in institutions like the United Nations, the European Union, or multinational corporations, people naturally worry about who holds the reins of control. While it's easy to imagine that the Illuminati might be behind the scenes, orchestrating these developments, the truth is likely much more complex. Power is rarely concentrated in the hands of a single group, and global events are shaped by a multitude of factors: economic, political, social, and cultural. However, the idea of a shadowy elite pulling the strings offers a simple explanation for a very complicated world. So, why do we continue to believe in the Illuminati's influence over world events, even in the absence of concrete evidence? The answer lies in the emotional appeal of conspiracy theories themselves. At their core, conspiracy theories offer us something that reality often cannot: certainty. In a world that can feel chaotic and unpredictable, conspiracy theories provide a sense of order. They give us someone to blame when things go wrong and offer the comfort of knowing that there is a reason behind every event, even if that reason is sinister. The idea that a group like the Illuminati is controlling world events gives us the illusion of understanding the world around us, even if that understanding is based on fiction rather than fact. But conspiracy theories also tap into something deeper: a distrust of authority. Throughout history, those in power have often abused their positions, and the fear that elites might be working against the interests of the common people is not unfounded. When we see corruption, inequality, and injustice in the world, it's easy to believe that there must be someone, somewhere, orchestrating it all. The Illuminati, with their secretive origins and associations with powerful ideas, have become the perfect villains in this narrative. Whether they ever held as much power as some believe, or whether they exist at all today, is almost beside the point. They represent something more than a mere historical group. They represent our fear of the unseen forces that shape our lives. As we sift through the myths and facts surrounding the Illuminati's supposed influence on world events, one thing becomes clear. The power of the Illuminati lies not in their actual deeds, but in the stories we tell about them. Whether they were truly behind revolutions, the founding of nations, or the creation of global institutions, or whether they were merely a small group of intellectuals whose legacy was exaggerated by rumor and fear, Their name has become synonymous with hidden power. Perhaps the most important takeaway from the Illuminati legend is not whether they controlled world events, but why we are so eager to believe that they did. In an uncertain world, the idea of an all-powerful group manipulating events offers a comforting narrative. It provides a clear villain, a reason for the chaos, and a promise that if we can only uncover the truth, we might reclaim some control over our destiny. The Illuminati may or may not have shaped history, but they have certainly shaped our imagination. And in many ways, that might be the greatest power of all. As you scroll through your social media feed or flip through channels on TV, you've likely seen it. A hand gesture forming a triangle, an eye surrounded by rays of light, or a cryptic reference to a secret society. Over the last few decades, the Illuminati has become a staple of modern pop culture, from music videos and films to viral conspiracy theories that dominate YouTube and Reddit. But how did a secretive group from 18th century Bavaria with lofty ideals about reason and knowledge become so deeply embedded in the fabric of modern entertainment? And what does this fascination say about us? To understand the rise of the Illuminati as a cultural phenomenon, we need to dive into the intersection of history, media, and the human psyche, particularly our deep-rooted fear of unseen forces pulling the strings. The Illuminati have transformed from a group of thinkers into something far larger, a myth that resonates with modern anxieties about power, control, and